Experts in the Wire is sponsored by BuzzSumo. Stick around to hear how you can get 30% off 3 months of BuzzSumo. Okay, let's get into today's show.
This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer?
Experts in the Wire, episode 96. Marie Haynes. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 96 of Experts on the Wire. It is a pleasure of mine to have a third-time repeat guest on the show with us today, Marie Haynes. She was episode number 1 of Experts on the Wire. So if you go all the way back to the archive, you can hear the very first interview with Marie Haynes. But today, we're going to chat about something a little different that I think a lot of people are actually curious about, and that is, how do you deliver effective SEO consulting? How do you handle things like billing, like payments, like communication, like delivering good work, staying on task, all those things that if you're an SEO consultant or you're working with a consultant, even if you work in-house, even if you're an employee, these are all things that I think we sometimes struggle with and deal with when we're delivering SEO services. So we're going to chat all about that. I've got your questions from Twitter as well. But first, I'm going to introduce Marie for the third time. Marie, how are you?
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me here. I'm great. How are you?
I am excellent. I want to jump in, and for the listeners out there who have not heard your background before, just tell us when you first got into SEO, and recently you shared a really great tweet that sort of told the story of why you got into websites and website work to begin with. I'm wondering if you could tell that to us now.
Sure. I have a kind of a crazy story. So I actually was a veterinarian for years, 13 and a half years, and my whole life was dedicated to veterinary medicine. And at one point, I created a website to allow my clients to ask me questions online. And I was trying to figure out how to get more traffic from Google, and that got me interested in SEO. And so I did SEO sort of as a hobby in my spare time, and sometimes in between appointments, and then it just sort of took over. And then what happened was when Google came out with their Penguin algorithm in early 2012, I was actually pregnant and on bed rest, and this was an opportunity for me to just learn everything I could about Penguin. And I never thought it would be a career for me, but by the time it was time for me to go back to work after my maternity leave, I was actually running a full business right from my couch, making more money than I was as a vet, and really, really enjoying myself. So I ended up just staying home and continually improving my SEO skills. And I'm sure we'll get into what that's grown into today. So that's kind of not your typical entry into SEO, but that's my story.
And you've sort of made a name for yourself you started blogging and sharing what you knew and what you were learning about penalties and Penguin and things like that. Was there a decision point for you that you said, I want to actually write about this and blog about the things I'm learning about? Was that like a decision, or is it something you just started doing?
I think I just started doing it. So I've always felt like in order to understand something, if you can explain it to somebody else, then you can understand it really well.
Yeah.
And so I think it sort of started with forums. I would take part in a bunch of different forums and answer what questions I could, and then learn from the other questions that I couldn't answer. And then when everybody was asking the same question over and over again about Penguin or about links, I kind of felt like, let me just write something here. And I think I submitted something to Moz and had it approved, and that was kind of cool, and then everything just sort of snowballed from there because, once you start writing about a subject and then other people search for that subject, then potential customers come your way. And for quite a few months, I would have people that wanted to hire me, and I'd say, no, I'm not a marketer. I'm just learning stuff. And then eventually I got to the point where I felt like, yeah, I'm probably worth some money here, and started charging for consulting. Again, I mean, my path is probably not typical, although whose path is typical, right? I mean, we all have different ways that we got here. But yeah, I don't think I ever made a conscious decision to say, okay, now I'm going to grow my brand by writing. It just sort of unfolded.
Yeah. And so was it about 2012, 2013 that you were then working full-time as a consultant for other companies? Was it about that time?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, it was late 2012 that I really started taking on work for pay. Most of it was in the area of Google penalties, especially manual actions. So I did hundreds of those over the years starting in 2012.
And now you have a team, you've been hiring people, and we're going to chat about that a little bit later in the show. But I wanted to ask you first, so you mentioned how you kind of became known for writing about Penguin and penalties and Panda and other words that begin with P, apparently. And how important do you think it is to have this association with yourself? Like people can point to you and say, oh, that's the person that if I need help with Penguin, that's who I go to. How important do you think that is?
I think if you can do that, it's really good. I think in order to make a name for yourself, I probably wouldn't have much of a following if I was just doing all things general SEO. And it was, I think for me, there was just really good timing that there weren't that many people on the scene who, specialized in penalties. And it kind of grew into a profession right at the time when I was available to be there. But I think it doesn't necessarily have to be the new thing in SEO that makes a name for yourself. In some cases, it could be specializing in one area. For example, I know there are SEOs who work just with dentists, or at one point I had this dream of just doing SEO for veterinarians.
Right,
and that
makes sense.
Certainly, that can work, and you just become known as the best in that field, and then work starts to come your way.
Yeah, this is something I've personally felt like I struggle with in a sense because the way I approach SEO is I sort of approach it like, well, if you do all these areas 80% well or 90% well, that's where I see success in many cases with SEO is like you get 80% of the technical things happening correctly. It's the typical 80-20 rule where it's like, okay, you're good. Now let's move to keywords and content. Great, let's do that 80% well. Now let's move to promotion and, I hate to say link building, but external site promotion. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the problems in SEO right now is that it's not enough. I started off saying, well, yeah, if you want to just be known as the person who does SEO for dentists or for vets or a particular profession, but you have to know so much in order to fully do SEO services. And so that's why, my path worked so well for me because I could know everything there is to know about removing the common types of Google penalties and be really, really good at that. But then when somebody asked me for help with, I don't know, their canonical tags or, something that was not specifically related to penalties, I found like, I need to learn how to do this. And so to get to the point where you can do really most things in SEO well, it takes a long time to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think, there's all sorts of courses and university and college courses that, but I don't know if I have an answer to this other than, for me, I just became obsessed where every day I'm trying to learn something. And that's even how for us, we have a newsletter that we put out that came from that desire. I'm like, if I'm going to be spending 2 hours a day learning whatever happened with Google, then let me give that information to somebody. I've sort of strayed from your initial question, but I do think in order to do good SEO, you have to really, really have a good handle on a lot of things in terms of in the industry. It can't be enough these days to just focus on penalties or just one aspect of SEO.
Yeah, and I think the question also stems from a personal branding standpoint as well, whereas I feel like now this podcast is something that I can, people associate having an SEO podcast with myself. And I'm curious that it sort of seems like in the world of SEO, you at least need to say, well, I'm a link builder or, I'm a technical SEO. Like at this day and age, to stand out as a personal brand and even just among the community, you sort of have to have a thing that people can associate with you. It's hard to just say, oh, I do SEO, because it's like, great, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, and I think it really helps. Although, I think ultimately, and our goals, we don't even know what our final goals are for our company, but we do want to have a company where you can just come to us with any SEO question. And we've got all sorts of people that are able to do that. But I would not have I don't think I would have much name recognition if it wasn't for the penalty
Right.
situation. So yeah, I agree with you. And I think there's lots of opportunities now. There are people out there who are known as good in these spaces, but there's room for more. For example, AMP, anything to do with mobile. I think we're really lacking good, strong expertise in that area.
Yes.
Even security is another area too, where if you can become known as the person that people go to when they have an issue with malware or hacking or something like that, then that can really give you a following as well.
Yeah, you can. It's really interesting when you dig into the details of something. I almost thought I want to do a whole episode on time to first bite, because somebody asked me a question on Twitter. How do you optimize for time to first bite? And then all these answers came in from other people. Whereas I had no idea how much depth there was to that topic. Mm-hmm. For yourself, is the perception of someone as an expert with penalties and Penguin and so forth, is that something that is still important to you, or are you actually trying to kind of shake that and move beyond that as the perception?
Okay, I wouldn't say I'm trying to shake that. I mean, I think it serves me well when even if Google's not giving out so many manual actions these days, but in terms of algorithmic suppressions, whether you want to call them penalties or not, I mean, that still brings us a whole lot of business, I think, because I'm known in that space.
Yes.
We want to get to the point where we're not just for penalties. But yeah, I don't know if I have the exact answer for that, Dan. I think I always think I will be known as somebody who's good with Google penalties. But I saw this happening years ago. I mean, even I think probably 2 years into my career, I realized, this isn't going to last forever.
Right.
Google's not giving out all these manual actions. And so if I want to succeed and build this business and do all the things that I want to do with this business, then we have to broaden our expertise. So I think it's a good place to start in being known as the expert in something. And then always be learning and figuring out where to expand next.
We had a couple questions coming about client acquisition and selling SEO. The first one from Glenn Alsop. I'm sure you know him as ViperChill on Twitter. His great website, viperchill.com. He said he definitely wants some insight on acquiring new clients. He says, with the current state of the web, it's fairly easy to offer a lot of value and improve sites, but you have to keep in mind the people you want to work with get number one Google rankings promised in their inbox every day. So it sounds like his question is, first, generally, any thoughts on acquiring clients? And then second, how do you sort of combat all this noise out there of snake oil selling that happens in SEO?
Yeah, and that really bugs me, all those emails that we get. And we know that they're all just sent out automated. I'll get them to my own website selling SEO services that says, hey, we can get you to the top of Google for your number one search term.
You and I get these, and we sell and do SEO, and that's what's funny about them.
Yeah, and they're just automated. I mean, they have lists and they go out to everybody, and obviously some people fall for them. And so that's really hard for the people who actually truly do good SEO. That's hard for a couple of reasons, and one is that people are going to paint you with the same brush and think 99% of emails that I get are spammers, so you're probably a spammer too.
Right.
And the other thing too is it dilutes the perception of value for SEOs, because I get these emails that say, for $200 a month, I can get you to the top of Google. And then when, if somebody's going to hire a really good SEO who actually knows what they're doing, they're going to be paying a whole heck of a lot more than $200 a month. So yeah, those emails are awful. But in terms of getting clients, I think it really depends on where you are in your journey. I mean, if you're brand new, you're just learning some skills. I actually am a fan of doing some work for free or for a reduced cost.
Yes.
As long as expectations are set. And so when I first started, my very first penalty job that I got paid for, a guy came to me in a forum and he said, hey, you write a lot of stuff about removing penalties. Can I pay you? And I said, well, no, I haven't done this work. And he said, why don't we make a deal that if you successfully remove this penalty, I'll pay you $300. Which is very tiny compared to the jobs I had after that. But it was great because I learned he didn't have large expectations from me. And then I got paid in the end. And then the next job I did, I charged significantly more than that. So, I think if you're just starting out, then, get some clients, get some case studies under your belt. And then if you can show people like, hey, you know, this particular dentist or whoever, you know, no traffic Google, and now they've written me this glowing testimonial about all the stuff that we've done for them, you know, that's a good place to start. But I think the next question, though, is whether when you're an agency and you need to be attracting, you know, a high caliber of clients, I don't know that I have 100% the answer to that. But for me, what works is content. So, for example, when there was a big algorithm update on March 9th of 2018, and I recognized it was going to be huge. And so I dropped everything I did, wrote an article on all my findings on that. And to this day, I mean, every day I'm getting leads coming in from people who need help with that issue. Right. And then the other thing, which I have not had a lot of time to do, but is actually what I'm doing right now is, you know, talking on podcasts, writing guest posts even, you know, just ways to get your name out to say, oh, you have this problem, then I have the answer. And I'll let you in on a little secret that I use for guest posting. Maybe I shouldn't share this, but it's a good secret.
Well, now you've teased it, so all the listeners out there want to know now.
I teased it, so I have to do it. Yeah. Right? And that's that when I write a post for a guest post, I usually write something insanely detailed. And people would say, well, you're going to, you know, talk yourself out of business because, you know, for example, if I'm writing this post on how to use the disavow tool and I've told you everything you need to know, why, you know, am I going to take business away from me? And I think what often happens is if you go into so much detail, you establish yourself as like the person who knows a lot. And then people reading it often go, oh my goodness, that's just way too much. I need to hire somebody to do it. So that's one thing is don't be afraid of giving away too much. You know, I probably taught a lot of people how to do penalty work and probably took work away from me by teaching people to do that. But it's done great for my career. So the more value you can give to people, the better.
I'd say you're ROI positive for sure, doing detailed posts like that. I can mention a few quick channels and things that have worked for me recently. So for context, I'm we're a solo 2-person consultant company, myself and my wife. We do have a couple, you know, fairly big well-known clients though. So they sort of run the whole range. And LinkedIn has been a huge channel. A couple of the best clients I've had in the last year have come directly from a LinkedIn direct message. They totally skipped over my website, didn't even email me. It was just LinkedIn direct message. And I think that happened because I optimized my profile page. And if you actually go back to the episode with Viveka von Rosen, which is almost 2 years ago now, she taught me on that episode how to optimize my LinkedIn profile. And then I went and did what she told me to do. And I think that helps because your profile in LinkedIn is a great way to stand out. People go to LinkedIn and they search SEO. So I think LinkedIn search is actually a big thing. People search in there. And then 2 is I do try to regularly post content in LinkedIn. And just the way their feed algorithm works now, you can get shared like crazy in there. I'm sure you know that. I'm sure people out there have seen, you know, so-called broetry in LinkedIn where it's these like sort of long poetic storytelling things. The point being, LinkedIn's a great channel. And second, as always, networking and referrals has been huge. So I just had a relationship that from somebody from like 5 years ago reached back out and became a client. So I think that's really powerful in this world, in this space, because it's so based upon the personality, the trust, the relationship, the human connection. So those have been 2 big channels that I wanted to mention as well, in addition to yours, which are, you know, content and so forth. As far as new clients, Andrew at Optimizing, his question is, what can you do with new clients who want to know what you've done in the past? They want case studies. They want to see past results. But then there's this sort of past client confidentiality. You can't reveal certain things. So how do you balance that? How do you balance showing your results but not breaching that confidentiality?
Sure, that's a good question. And Andrew knows his stuff. So thanks for asking that, Andrew. If you want to look at an example on our website, so mariehaynes.com/ I think it's success-stories. We have a bunch of kind of mini case studies. And so there's 2 ways that I think that you can do this. One is to just ask your clients, can you use their data? Some of them are quite happy. You know, some of them will say, hey, I mean, we'll link to the website and, you know, we're quite proud of the work. Now, granted, I mean, if you're doing penalty work and, you know, it's like, you don't want to be saying like, hey, this business got into hot water and we help them out. But if you've done really, really good work, I mean, we have clients that would very happily allow us to use their analytics data, because they're happy with the work that we've done. And then there are other ones where we've signed non-disclosures, or we've, you don't want to put that big brand out there and say like, here's all the tactics that we've been using so that all your competitors can see it. So we do sort of anonymize data, and you can still put a case study together. I mean, we'll say, I'll take a screenshot from SEMrush showing the keywords that our site is ranking for, and then I'll just blur out any identifying information,
Yes.
or I'll take screenshots from SEMrush as opposed to Google Analytics data, because that's publicly available to anybody. So like, I still think you can put together a good portfolio. And I think once you've got a couple of successful clients under your belt, then approach them and ask them, can I use your name as a reference? And that's really a good thing. If you do good work, you should have tons of clients that are quite happy to glow about you.
Yeah, I think you can divide this into three things: references, company citations, and then actual analytics. And oftentimes on my website, I might name a company I worked with, but then never attach that to analytics. Or conversely, I'll share analytics, but everything's anonymized. And I might even say what industry it's in. So that's a common thing, is you can just say the space or the industry, or I'll list someone as a reference, but then never share their analytics or share that on my website. So I think dividing those into three categories makes a lot of sense as well. Okay, we're going to take a quick pause in this interview with Marie Haynes to tell you about BuzzSumo. I'm going to read a testimonial from Marissa O'Hare of Rolling Stone magazine. She says, BuzzSumo has become an essential tool for us, and we are continuing to uncover new uses over time. In short, BuzzSumo facilitates a much deeper understanding of our social footprint and helps us to develop smarter content strategies. So Rolling Stone is even making use of BuzzSumo, and you can go to buzzsumo.com and use the discount code DANSHURE, DANSHURE, and get 30% off 3 months of BuzzSumo. It's about a $75 savings to check it out. BuzzSumo.com, discount code DANSHURE, DANSHURE. How do you deal with people who come to you, or maybe just out there, that say SEO is too expensive? I remember we chatted last year. There was a company that approached you and me for penalty recovery work, and you mentioned that you gave them a price, and you and I both knew that this company thought it was way too high. How do you approach companies, or how do you talk to companies like that who just say SEO is too expensive?
Well, and this is a real problem, because SEO is too expensive for some companies. So here's the thing that I think happens. I think there's such a small pool of talent in the SEO community. I mean, there are people who are really good, but if you look at how many billions of businesses are out there that all need to have an internet presence, there's not enough skilled people. So what happens is, somebody who's just starting out, they start off taking a few local clients. Maybe they charge $500 or $1,000 a month, and then they start to get results, and so they get more clients, and they bump that up to $2,000 a month. And then, as if they're really good at it, then all of a sudden they're getting the $6,000 to $10,000 a month clients, and they're doing great work for them. So, and then they either create an agency or just go on to consult with the high end clients. And so what happens is, if you're that small business owner who, maybe your budget is $1,000 to $2,000 a month, what's left is, in a lot of cases, is either the people who don't know what they're doing, or scammers, really,
Yeah.
And so if you're a big brand, SEO should more than pay for itself. I mean, the money, it may take a few months to see the ROI, but it shouldn't cost you to hire a good SEO.
Yeah.
The problem is, though, where my heart goes out to is the small business owners, like I said, that can't afford good help. And then what you can get for the budgets you can afford is often not going to move the needle. So I don't know. I mean, we're working on some potential solutions to that, but it'll be years down the road before we have that out. But yeah, you're right. Good SEO is expensive because there aren't a lot of people that are really, really good at it. So they're worth a lot.
I made a video for somebody to put on their website. I might make this video public and make and put it on my YouTube channel at some point. But I put together like 9 selling points of SEO, and I want to highlight just a few here. See what you think of these. But when people come to me and they say, "Well, why is SEO so expensive?" For example, the hourly rate on my website right now is $3.50 an hour. And I bumped that up. One of the reasons I bumped that up is because a lot of that comes through clarity.fm, and they take a 20% or something right off the top there. And so when I realized that was happening, I said, well, I want to bump that up. And then when you look on Clarity, it's also, like you said, supply and demand in the market. I've seen some people testing prices up to $1,000 an hour on Clarity. And then you go back and you see the same person has bumped it down a little bit later, which is interesting. So when I try to sort of sell against that, one point, and you sort of hinted at this earlier, is to give that hour of consulting, I'm actually doing 4 hours of work, sometimes researching, keeping up with Google, trying to stay on top of all the SEO news that leads to that consulting. And so I think when somebody hires you by the hour, they're not just getting that hour, they're getting all the work that's led up to that hour as well. Another example is when I do my audits, this is 7 or 8 years where I've spent accumulating a checklist of over 200 items that I manually check in every audit. And so that's building up sort of a resource, almost like a bank account where it's compounding. And when somebody comes for an audit now, I have 8 years of this asset that I've built up to then use to put into their audit. So in my opinion, I think to do an audit, for example, it should take an SEO less time, but to do better work as they get better. What do you think about? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, my hourly rate is very high as well. But the market is there. There are people who are willing to pay for high quality advice, and again, like you said, the years of experience. And I think if you're like relatively new at SEO and you've got a few clients and you actually are seeing some good work, don't be afraid to bump your hourly rate up. I think nobody really knows exactly what they're worth. And every time I've had an increase in salary or significant change in services, it's always been where we got super busy, and then we said, look, we can't take on more of this work, so let's just increase the price, or let's increase I was finding I was doing too many phone consults, so I increased my hourly rate. And if people are still paying it, then
right.
then go for it. I think there's a lot of rookie SEOs out there that have some skills, but you're only charging a amount, and that probably could be increased.
One interesting thing that happens, I just did a consulting call today, and some people see that price and they see that it's high and they want to be efficient. So this guy came prepared with a list of specific questions, and he had docs open, and that's efficient for both of us. And I think they value your time more that way. They get more out of it because he's more prepared. He's not asking questions that maybe he could have answered on his own. And I think in a way that provides more value for the client sometimes when you charge more.
There are some cases where I will refuse to do an hourly consult, because often what I find happens is people want you to fix a problem that normally would take us a whole week to fix,
right?
And they want it in the space of an hour. But yeah, and it just comes down to the same as everything else. Is if you can provide good value, then people are willing to pay that. And I think whenever we do an hourly call, I usually encourage people to come up with very specific questions for me to answer. And I find, it depends on who you're talking to. Some of the times these hourly calls is most of the time talking, and so I think if you're consulting with an SEO, then it's good to just ask very specific questions, and then sit back and listen to the advice that you get, because I've seen a lot of people, in my opinion, waste an hour with me because they're just talking the whole time.
Yeah, that is funny. How do you feel about when you're in the coming up with a proposal, discussing before they've hired you, when you're in that process? What's your feeling on so-called giving away things for free, like little bits of advice here or there, maybe a little bit of free consulting when you're learning about their business? This is something that I go back and forth on. I try to fill it out. I even wrote a post last year about like why I was giving free consulting in some cases because I was seeing ROI in terms of winning those clients. What's your feeling on that? Should you give anything away for free or hold everything back, or what do you think?
I go back and forth on this as well because, I mean, it's my nature to want to help anybody. If you email me and say, you know, my site's not ranking, I automatically want to get in there and look at it. And I had to set a rule for myself just because of the massive amount of email that I have every day. I set a rule for myself that if this is a non-paying client who wants advice, I'm spending no more than 3 minutes investigating and typing an answer. Because there are days where I can spend 4 or 5 hours in email, and that's not productive. I can't be building my business if I'm, you know, continually giving away free advice.
Yes.
With that said, I mean, if I see something super obvious, like I've had people email me and say my site is not appearing on Google, and it turns out that there's a no index tag on, you know, on the site. I'm not going to hold back on that. Of course, I'm going to tell you, oh, here's the problem, and this is probably going to fix things. But I'll give the odd little bit of free advice. So often I'll look at a site and I'll say, you know, on first impression, I think this could be an issue. You know, you could look into that. The problem, though, is that people then push it too far.
Right. They expect more.
And so then I have this big, long email thread where I have to eventually say, like, hey, do you want to hire me or not?
Right.
And so that becomes tricky. The other thing, too, is in giving away, again, information. So in terms of writing, again, like if I write a whole post on, I do a traffic drop assessment, will that take away from my business for traffic drops? I don't think so. I like I said before, I'm happy to give that kind of information away. And then the other thing that really gets me is the quick 10-minute phone calls.
Right.
And I never know what to do with those, right? Because I don't want to be that person that says, oh, I'm too busy, I'm too important for you to call me. Yet often these 10-minute phone calls are people trying to get as much advice as they can. And so one of the things I like to do is I'll say, I'm very, very happy to do a 10-minute call to introduce myself. I can say, look, I'm quite happy to talk to you, and maybe, you know, we'll determine whether we should work together. But I'm not going to give away a whole strategy session in a free call.
Yeah, this is tough. I had a situation where I was in the prospecting process. I gave a few tips of advice. I even made a little 10-minute video. You know, I was trying to get this client, and then I was browsing LinkedIn 2 months later. The CEO or the owner that I had talked to wrote this big long post on LinkedIn saying how SEO is dead. It doesn't work. You don't need an SEO. Yet I went to the website. They had actually put into practice some of my strategies I gave them, and they were working. And so this is somebody where I gave some advice for free. I was hoping that they would become a client. I have no hard feelings about it, but this is a thing that I think if anyone out there listening, if you're going to give free advice, this is the danger you might run into. This is what might happen. They could take that advice, put it in action, it'll work. And then this guy's out there on LinkedIn saying SEO is dead. It doesn't work. And that was the part that I found very hypocritical. But, you know, that always stuck in my mind after that moment when that happened. I said, am I actually, you know, undervaluing what I'm telling people? Because sometimes as SEOs or as an expert at something, you might say something that seems obvious to you, but to them, it changes their entire approach or strategy. And that's actually a value that you should value, and you should place some sort of monetary amount to that.
Yeah, and I think the key really is in trying to determine which leads are actually going to turn into customers, right? So, I mean, if I have somebody who's going to be doing a review with us, and I'm quite certain that, you know, in our discussions that they're going to hire us, then yeah, I'll quite happily, you know, jump on the phone, answer a quick issue or something like that. But I would say that company you're talking about never intended to hire you anyways. Yeah. I would think. I mean, it sounds like they just were looking for free advice, you know, and so yeah, sometimes, and I've been wrong on this before, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll just respond with a very brief email initially if I think it's somebody that is not going to pay attention, and I'll just say, you know, our review cost this much. I think this is how we could help you. And 90% of the time, I never hear back from them. Right. So then I haven't invested a lot of time. Right. But then the odd time that people do write back, and then I can, you know, communicate in a more thorough way. But we have a different problem than most companies, I would think, in that, like, we have almost too much business coming in. I mean, that sounds egotistical to say, but that's why we're trying to build this team to, be able to grow things. So I think, I would probably have a different approach if we didn't have a waiting list for our work.
Jeremy Rivera on Twitter, I want to jump now to talking about pricing. He has a great question. What are the pros and cons of consulting on an hourly basis versus retainers versus packages? I think we all struggle with this. What are your thoughts on this? Do you have one certain way that you price, pros and cons? What do you think?
This is really tough as well, because hourly, I mean, what takes me an hour might take somebody on my team 2 hours. And so do we charge for 2 hours? Do we charge less because I did it faster? That doesn't make sense, right? So most of the projects that we do, we bill per project. And then we try to set some expectations of roughly how many hours we'll be spending on that. Mm-hmm. And I find it usually just works out. I mean, we'll bill a certain monthly fee perhaps and expect between maybe 10 and 15 hours from the team. And that seems to work out well. I do some hourly work, but then I find what happens every time is I end up spending way more time and saying, well, I'm not going to bill for that because, maybe I check Twitter in between or something like that. Yeah. So for the vast majority of the stuff that we do, we bill per project as opposed to hourly.
What I've landed on is I will only bill hourly if it's for a phone call. So I'm literally physically on the call with that person. So they're basically paying for my time and interaction with them one-on-one. Or in rare cases, maybe somebody has 1 to 2, maybe 3 or 4 hours of like work they need. And I've looked at it and I've assessed that they don't need anything more than that. Then I might do hourly. But anything beyond that, I avoid hourly as well. How do you think about pricing these projects and packages and so forth? Do you try to estimate the people hours that it's going to take with you and your team and land on a price? Do you have starting points? How does that work exactly?
Yeah, and that's something that we're right in the midst of trying to figure out right now. And I think, probably every agency has that struggle of where do you price your services? Because they're worth a lot, but you also want to be fair to people. And so one of the things that we're doing right now, so our main products are site quality reviews, and we offer different levels of reviews. And one of the things that we're working on as a team is to figure out, I think there's some parts of our reviews that we actually don't need to include. Right. And so instead of charging more, we're actually trying to make it so that we spend less time as a team and still produce the same value for people. And so, I've read so many posts on how to price your products and even the psychology of what numbers to use and, does it end with this number and things like that. And I just find trial and error sort of works. So, we may quote more for perhaps one case that is going to be difficult because it's in a different language or something. But yeah, so we sort of, we take a guess. Then we see how well things are selling. If we're selling with no complaints about the price, then we could probably increase our price for that product. Right. And yeah, so I don't have a distinct strategy, but really it comes down to how much value do we think we can give to people, and then what are people willing to pay, and we sort of take it from there.
Have you ever reached a point where maybe you were working with a client or you had some clients and you wanted to increase your prices? Is this something that you have ever done or recommend doing? It's something I've thought about. I have some clients that go back 4 or 5 years. If you're listening, hello, but it's something I haven't increased your prices if you're listening, but it's something I've thought about doing. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good point. I haven't. I have clients that I've had for years. I have one client who pays me $100 a month for way more than $100 a month worth of work. Yeah. And I never, I haven't increased their rates. I don't think it's wrong to do that though. We do have some contracts where we've written in, a line saying that after a year, the contract can be renegotiated. And yeah, I think I think what I would rather do is if we had a successful client that wanted to renegotiate the contract is, try to get them to get more hours from us perhaps or more work. But yeah, I don't think it's wrong to increase your rates, especially if you're doing good work. But it's not something that we've done a lot of with our ongoing clients.
I want to talk a little bit about billing, payments, fun stuff, right? Jeremy Rivera also asked, do you have any ideal ways to establish billing processes? Maybe another way to ask this is cash flow in general, things in that regard. I know this is something we've played with a lot here, trying to figure out how to optimize for cash flow, how to mitigate clients paying late, etc. Anything you found worked in that regard?
Yeah, so I have somebody who I hired. It was probably my first hire was somebody just to help me do all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
And I would say I'm by far an expert from that. So I would definitely recommend. I mean, if you're Canadian, I can give you a name of somebody who's really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would recommend hiring somebody, even if it's part-time, just to do that sort of accounts receivable stuff and follow up on lost payments and things like that. It hasn't been a huge issue for us. I think I've only had 2 clients in all my years of doing this that have refused to pay me, and it was for small amounts. But yeah, I mean, for some businesses that can be a big deal for sure. So yeah, that would be my best advice: is get somebody who knows what they're doing.
One little tip we've used, I'll give the listeners, is if, especially if a client that has a habit of paying late or sometimes, paying right at the last second, maybe a few days before their invoice is due, we'll send like a quote unquote friendly reminder, right? So that's better than like sending a follow-up invoice once the payment is late. I find these friendly reminders can trigger them to pay because maybe you sent it for net 30 and they just forgot about it, right? And you send them a reminder 3 days before, and then oftentimes they'll pay it immediately. So that's one little thing we found that has worked.
Yeah, and I should add too that we don't do very much work without prepayment. So,
right.
If you're doing a review from us, then sometimes, yes, we'll split it up into a couple of payments for people, but we won't start anything until we've actually got the first payment. And I think that can reduce a lot of this. There are pretty unethical companies out there that will hire people and have no intention of paying you. So, you need to get something up front. And then even with our recurring work, we generally say, we'll start the work once the payment has been completed. So that can mitigate, losses in that way too. A lot of companies that say that they're net 30, net 60, or even longer, I find a lot of the time, if you just say to them, look, that's not how we work, like you have to pay the invoice up front, they find a way to do it. So I wouldn't make that an excuse either, because I've seen other SEOs say, they've been waiting for months for payments from big companies, and often you just push them a little bit. If they need the work done, they'll find a way to pay you.
Yeah, we found the same. When I remember to communicate that up front, we tend to get the payment much more quickly at the beginning. Oftentimes it's my fault where I just don't tell them. In terms of, let's chat a little bit about delivering work, communication, etc. Simon Swan on Twitter, he wants to know if you have any useful advice when you have completed your keyword research, or maybe like the beginning process in mapping keywords, etc., into the content for a page. I think his question is basically, what are best practices to employ into your content in 2018? After all the keyword mapping, etc. So how, what are some good practices in content?
In other things you can do to optimize? Is that?
I'll read his question verbatim.
Or?
I'll read it verbatim and let's interpret it as we will. So I sort of butchered that. Sorry about that. Quote, any useful advice when you have completed your keyword research, the process in mapping tons of keywords into the content of a page for SEO, 2018 best practice. Thanks. I think what he's saying is when you have a lot of keywords that could be applied to one page, how do you map those into that one page?
Okay, sure. So what we'll tend to do is narrow it down to the most important keywords. And we don't use an exact formula for that. We'll just sort of look at the volume basically and the value of each keyword. And we'll maybe have a maximum of 5 keywords that we want to make sure that we get into either the title tag or some H tags. And then the rest of the keywords, we just try to, naturally put them in the content, but maybe not all of them, So I don't know if that's what the question is, or if the question is more about how to communicate that to your client.
Mm-hmm.
That could be, and then that varies from client to client as well. It depends on whether they write their own content, whether they have writers that do it. And so we use Google Docs for so much, and so we'll, if we work with a team that has a team of writers, we'll basically provide a document for them saying, like, we would like the title tag to say this, we would like, the H1 tag to say this, and then we'd like you to write copy that says this and includes these words. So that's kind of the path that we take for that.
Yeah, the way I illustrate this is I take an existing piece of content they have, we go to search analytics, we go into all the queries for that one page, and I'm like, look, this is your content. You're ranking for 950 keywords, yet they're not all on the page literally, and you didn't stuff them all in there, and maybe you don't even think about that. So you don't need to do that for, proactively for new content. And so that's my approach too, is I almost sometimes just look at one. And I'm like, put that one in your title tag, make the page about this topic, and then you're done, right? And so that's typically my approach as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we certainly don't. I mean, if you have a list of 100 keywords, it's not like you have to get all 100 of those into the document. Like if you have 100 keywords that are all super valuable, then maybe we need to create some more content, on that topic for sure.
Markel Harden on Twitter wants to know, when you're diving into a successful SEO project that's already thriving, so it's already underway, what is the best place to begin? Where is the best place to begin so that you add value and do no harm? So I think her question is more about like, how do you kind of pick up in the middle, not make things worse and make things better?
Right. I think that's all about communication, right? I mean, you need to know what work has been done, what the tactics are, what the expected goals were, and then where you're coming into that. Because we've had cases where we've jumped into the middle of something and realized that they're building links that are horrible. And so, do we conflict with what the initial team was doing, or and it can be challenging. But I think that's a very specific situation, right? So it's going to depend on what's happening. But I think as long as you're following white hat practices, really shouldn't be able to do that much wrong,
right?
In terms of derailing a campaign. I think where you could run into problems is where you're trying to stretch the guidelines a little bit too much. Then that's where you really want to know what everybody has been doing.
Yeah, this is something.
Not that we stretch guidelines.
This is a fear I had early on as a consultant. Is oh my goodness, I don't want to like ruin their SEO by doing something. And to echo what you said is, there's very little you can do to actually like ruin their SEO. And one thing just to keep in mind is don't change or modify or dare I say delete any important pages that are driving a high level of traffic, right? So if you want to be cautious at the beginning, don't meddle with what's working. So look at your top traffic pages, and like if you want to be cautious, just leave those alone, right, for a little while until you kind of get your feet grounded. That's what I typically do. David Gray on Twitter wants to know, how do you explain the amount of time spent on work and how different projects vary? Many clients expect X hours per month. It doesn't always work that way. So what if a client comes to you and they're like, well, why did this thing take you 4 hours or 5 hours and we're paying you hourly? Or how do you deal with those sort of time expectations?
I can't say that I've ever had that happen. I don't think I've ever had a client say, hey, you billed me for 4 hours and I don't feel like I got my 4 hours worth. So I think if that's happening on a regular basis, then maybe we need to look at what we're actually providing to people. The other thing too is, and I think I said this before, is that I'll sometimes be a little bit too generous with my time. And so let's say I was hired for a 4-hour job, and I'm finding that it's taking me, 6 hours to do it properly, which is usually because I have to learn something. There's maybe some weird JavaScript issue that I'm not 100% on. And so then you go like, do I really charge the client for my time to learn that or not? Right. And that's part of why we don't always take the 4 hour, like we don't take hourly jobs. So I might say, look, I know I can't produce a really good product in 4 hours. And so I'll bite the bullet and spend the extra couple hours so that they get the value that they need. But I've had other cases though where I've realized I've way underquoted, and then gone back to them and said, like, guys, I'm really sorry. This is going to take me way longer. And in every one of those cases, they've been fine with. So I think it's all about communication, and if you have clients that are saying they're not getting their money's worth, then, something needs to change, or maybe you're dealing with the low end, low budget that's not going to be happy with anything, because that happens too.
This is a question for me. I'm curious, has there ever been a penalty that you couldn't figure out, that you didn't help somebody recover from? And if so, how do you deal with charging for that or not? Like, what if, I've always wondered that, people that deal with penalty recovery work, like sometimes maybe it's just not fixable. And then do you, are you still charging for that? What happens in that case?
So it depends on the type of penalty. So if it's an unnatural links penalty, I've had 100% success in removing those. And so I'll charge per job for that, and charge a fair amount per job, and guarantee that the penalty will be. And so what I generally do is charge in increments, and then the last payment comes out once we actually have notification that the penalty is removed. But that's because I know that it's, if you do a thorough job, you're going to get that removed. There are other cases, though, where sometimes I won't even take on a case. So, for example, a pure spam penalty, the vast majority of those, your website really didn't deserve to rank in the first place. Right. And so, I'm not going to guarantee penalty removal when I don't think that these penalties are ever going to rank again.
Yeah.
And then I do have some where I'll charge an hourly rate, but a minimum. So I'll say, I'll consult with you on removing this penalty for 3 hours, and if we find we need more, then we'll bill for more after that. So I've had some really difficult cases with thin content penalties, and those I think we've succeeded in every one, but it can be hard to know how to bill, because I don't know whether it's going to take one reconsideration request, or it's going to take 6 months of tweaking things and contacting people and, and whatnot. And so for those, I'll usually bill in chunks of hours. So I do bill hourly for that. Yeah. And then I think the biggest thing that I can, advice that I can give here is just properly set expectations. So you don't want to promise that you're going to completely do the job for X amount of dollars, and then find out that it's going to take you 4 times as long. So you have to communicate all of those things up front.
Yeah, that's tricky. I've tried to do some penalty recovery projects, and because it's not something I do often. I am able to fix them, but I don't do that often. So that's where I fall short, is I undercharge, or I don't communicate up front, hey, this is going to take 6 months. So that's been a struggle, I think. And I think the advice there is helpful. As far as reporting, Jeremy Rivera also wants to know how much reporting is enough or too much? And maybe we can generally extend this to just communication in general.
I'm laughing at this because my reporting is too much. So we and that's one of the things my team and I are trying to work with is, some of our reports. So I'm talking about our site quality reports. I mean, some of them have been 150 pages, and they're full of good stuff, but no business owner has time to read through 150 pages of advice, right? And so this is going to vary from client to client. I think for monthly clients, I mean, they want to see analytics data and rankings if it's important, or conversion data. And in a lot of cases, you can almost automate, how that part of the report is delivered. And then what we do is we basically just have this document of all of the issues that we discussed that month and that we worked on. And so then what we started to do was sort of make a summary of those issues at the beginning of our document, so that if the client doesn't have hours to review things, I mean, some clients do. Some clients will look at every single thing that we do, and then others, they just want to know, like, what did you do? How did we improve? And let's move on. So we try to make it as brief as possible for the site owner as well.
John Morabito on Twitter, he has a bit of a communication question. He wants to know about keeping your cool with some of the worst clients and people, in quotes, that's funny, just bad people, you'll ever meet. Not that all my clients are like this, asking for a friend. So, bit of a charming question there, John, but I guess generally, have you run into situations where you've sort of had to bite your tongue? How do you deal with stuff like that?
Yeah, and I don't know if we handle this differently because we're very polite Canadians. I mean, we probably let some people walk over us a little bit too much.
Yeah.
I certainly won't stand for abuse. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but I've had over email just some people that are really upset because I think some people think I work for Google or something and that I penalize their site. I mean, I honestly don't know, but I've had some people where I just blocked them, and I've had even mail come to my house that was like really scary. Yeah, and I mean, but that doesn't happen often. The vast majority of people are good. And then I find a lot of it too is where these clients are coming from. So I had this one client that we worked with years and years ago to remove a penalty, and then every SEO company that they hired was awful. Like they got really bad work. And so they came back to us and said, like, we really want you to do this work. Because when I did penalties, I didn't do additional SEO work. So we took them back as clients. And it's gone really well, and so we can look and we can see some of their frustrations were just because they've had bad work done for them in the past. And so let's just try to produce good work. Let's not get and we have really good communication with them as well. So I think it's just like any relationship, if you can communicate properly, then things work out all right. And then when you get the odd person that's just going to argue with absolutely everything you say, well, then it's time to let them go. Even if they're an expensive client, it's not worth your mental health to deal with people who are going to be frustrating you all the time.
Sure. I'm typically pretty level-headed. I don't think I've been in a situation where I've thought that I was going to, quote unquote, lose my cool with anybody. But in any challenging situations where I feel like a client is just doubting everything you say or seems argumentative or dismissive, what I try to do is take it back to the very basics at a factual level. So if we're having some disagreement about an SEO strategy or something, oftentimes I find it's just this general paradigm difference or just a small little difference in outlook or a misunderstanding about something about SEO. And so what I find is taking it back to the very basics, the definition of like domain authority, for example. Oftentimes there's just a little silly miscommunication that is often overlooked. So that's what's worked for me is I just try to take the emotion aside and take it back to clarifying basic facts. I found that to be good. And I
think some for me too is it's so hard when you read email because you can sort of in your mind make up what the tone is.
Right.
And I think sometimes, especially I feel like this happened to me more when I first started out, but I would read an email and all I could hear was critical tone and you don't know what you're doing. And it's probably my own imposter syndrome that gets in there. And then I would read the same email to my husband and he'd say, well, that sounds fine to me, you know? And so I think sometimes it's we can interpret that somebody's angry over email when really they just want a clarification or something, right? So part of it is just a mental game to tell yourself, oh, I'm good at this, and even though they disagree, I can still communicate about it without shutting myself down, So some of it is just being mentally mature enough to handle a conversation in an adult way.
So in terms of now you're hiring people, you've got a bit of a growing company. When did you make your first hire? And I guess why did you decide to make this first hire as well?
Sure. So I mentioned that I had somebody who worked for me part-time just to do my books and whatnot. So I've had him with me for a couple of years. And then in August of last summer, I made the leap to hire. And my initial goal was to hire one person just to gather some data for me to help me get through more reports, because I had a 4-month waiting list for these reports. And I thought, well, if I have one person working, that would be good. And then here's the funny story. We came to look at office space and we looked through this building and we passed this massive office. And it was office number 404. And so I joked to my husband, I said, nobody would be able to find the office. And he said, what? He didn't understand it. Yeah. But the funny thing, I said, I want that office. He says, okay. So we ended up just taking the bigger office. I ended up hiring 3 people instead of 1. And it's worked out amazingly well. So we've just added another person and we may have 1 more by the end of this week, I would think. And so, yeah, it's been, a really interesting experience. And we've really worked hard on, I've worked hard on putting training manuals together with the goal of, making these people super, super smart about SEO so that anybody on my team could answer any questions that people would have. And it's working out really well.
Yeah, we had a few questions come in about hiring and growing an agency. James Norquay wanted to know, what do you look for in staff hires, and what does your interview process look like?
So everybody who I talked to, when I first said I was going to hire people, gave me the advice that I should hire very skilled people at a very high salary. And we're completely bootstrapped. I don't have any funding whatsoever. And so, that would be a challenge. And so what we did was hire people with very little experience. Some of them have built some websites and have some SEO experience, but not very much at all. And so that only works if you have a really, really good training program. And so we've put in ads at the local colleges, universities. Indeed is very popular in this area, so we do that as well. And then our interview process is very laid back. Our top thing that we're hiring for right now is just people that we have fun with, that we can get along with as a team. And yeah, I mean, so far it's worked out well. The goal is to continually, we will be raising salaries as we raise skill level as well. And like I said, I mean, my first team has been with us since August, and it's amazing how much they've learned, So this process is working well for me. I don't think it's the typical way to do an agency, but it's working out well so far.
Are there certain attributes you have to look for? Because if they don't have experience doing SEO or auditing, etc., are there certain signs that somebody has the right potential skills to do SEO well that you look for?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do, so we have our job listing, and the job listing says, if you're interested in this job, you need to go answer the questions on this page of our website. And so these questions it's your typical, how did you find out about us? Why do you want this job? Stuff like that. But then there are also a couple of questions that are about specific websites. And so we send them, if you make it to the second round, we send these questions that say, I give some examples from Google Analytics of a site that saw drops across Bing, Yahoo, and Google. And then my question is, I know you're not trained in Google Analytics, but if I told you that this site had made major changes, do you think a Google algorithm update affected them, or was it the changes? Now, you and I mean, we look at that and we're like, oh yeah, the drop was across Bing, Yahoo, and Google, so it's probably not a Google algorithm change. And it's amazing how many people just can't get that, don't understand that.
Right.
So I ask a few questions like that, to get a sense of what I'm looking for is, can they figure something out if given the information? And number two, do they make stuff up? Because I don't want that. Right. I don't want somebody, I've had people whose response to that question was they obviously researched me and said, oh, obviously the Penguin algorithm affected this site. And and they came out with all of this stuff that sounded great, but was completely wrong. So we're looking for personality, that you're going to get along well with the team, ability to think clearly, and then I don't want you to be making stuff up.
And then in terms of the training process, we had a question from Bonnie Satani, I think is how you pronounce your name. I'm sorry if I don't have that correct. It came from the Twitter thread, which I will link to in the show notes. Their question is how to scale the agency and train new people. So starting with the training part first, talk a little bit more about that and then how you're thinking about growing the agency. Yeah,
so for me, I started writing training manuals, a couple years before I actually hired anybody.
Wow.
And so I took pretty much, I don't even think I realized what I was doing at the time. I was sort of making templates for myself. And then as I hired people, I could expand on that and say, well, here's the instructions on how to find this information in Google Analytics or whatever. And so I think that having training manuals that live in a live document, such as on Google Docs, are vitally important. And And then what we do is we have everybody work in the same room we were around one big table. Now we've moved to two tables. And then as new things come up, so if somebody emails me with a very interesting question, then we'll cast that situation up on the screen. And then as a team, we all brainstorm on how can we beat this? How can we figure this out? And now as we're getting our second wave of new employees come in, it's neat to see the first employees are doing some training, figuring out, teaching them how to get the analytics data or answer these questions. So that's sort of our process. I think we still have a lot. That's a lot of my business development is 90% developing training still. So, and I don't think that'll ever end really.
How do you and your employees actually deliver work? I think one of the reasons we're actually having this conversation on the podcast is because last year we had a discussion where I talked about I find I'd like to deliver work on Skype or face-to-face, and you even suggested a type of service that I provide, which, by the way, I've been providing for the last year, and it's accounted for like 20% or 30% of the work I've been doing or something like that. So thank you for that. So I found that I like to do and deliver work in a very, direct manner. I like to teach. I like to consult as I'm delivering and doing the docs. How do you find that works with your team? Is it based upon the personality of the person? Like, how do you actually do and deliver the work for clients?
So we do two main things when we're delivering to clients. So first of all, I'll have one of my team members is the lead for each project. So if we're trying to do a traffic drop assessment, for example, they'll do the majority of the work. And then when they're finished their review using the templates and the guide that I've created, then they give it to me and I, put my input in there. And that's where if there are issues that we haven't faced before, then the whole team again gets involved and everybody learns this new issue. So it's neat because every review we do, we get, the whole team grows as well. And we actually produce a written report. They're still fairly lengthy, but a good chunk of the report is stuff that we've templated out that we've said, oh, you have this issue, so we can copy and paste this answer. But we still do everything, almost everything by hand. Like we do use some tool to crawl the site and whatnot. But this is a review that which I wasn't doing when we talked last, Dan, but I think our talk inspired me to do this as well. We do a video where we walk through the most important issues and the things that we discovered that, or maybe we want to show how a competitor is serving customers better. And that's a lot easier to just show on video. So we deliver, we put that up as an unlisted video on YouTube and we can just send it to the client if they don't want that. And the report. And then what we're debating on now is how much support afterwards to give. We were doing an hour phone call. The problem is as we grow, I can't be doing hour phone calls, multiple times per day. So we're experimenting with some ways to communicate in Slack after we've delivered a review. But that's something that we're still working out.
And how much
as well?
How much is you or your team doing actual phone calls or meetings with clients?
I try to cut down on that as much as I can.
It's funny because I've gone in the opposite direction since we've talked.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, a lot of the time we do this hour phone call and it's really, we could have done it in 10 minutes, and I just find my biggest problem for me personally is time management. So I think maybe when we can get the team to the point where I'm even less involved, we might do more phone conversations. But yeah, I do find Slack is good for us because we don't have to answer instantly. And again, we can use things as teaching opportunities for the team. So if one person doesn't know how to answer a client's question on Slack, then there's a good chance that other people don't. And then we can learn that way too. Sure.
Do we have room for one more Twitter question, Marie, before we wrap things up?
Sure, yeah.
So this question comes from Jay-Z, and the question is not the rapper Jay-Z, but Jay-Z on Twitter. The letters Jay-Z. What's the best advice you can give to someone starting out? So we're going full circle here. I think it's general advice for someone starting out in the world of SEO consulting.
Okay, well, I think the best advice I could give is to find a website to just start practicing on. And so maybe that's, maybe you have to build one of your own or get one built, something that's in an area of a hobby of yours. Or it could be, maybe you have a friend or a relative with a business, as long as they fully understand that you're starting out, but you can, try to get it ranked. And so you can take all sorts of courses and read everything online, but until you've actually gotten in there and seen what works, it's really hard to call yourself an SEO. So I would say that's the first place to start, is either, rank your own website or rank a friend or a relative's website. And then once you've got that under your belt, then you can, go to the next person and say, hey, we successfully got this website ranking, and this business owner says, wow, my leads have doubled. And then you can go get other clients. So that's, I would say, you start out by actually doing something, and not just reading.
Yeah, and that's certainly a way to gain experience, I think, and sort of learn your skills. One piece of advice I'll throw in there, if it's starting out in terms of growing your, personal brand or like your networking, and if you're not ready to publish content, I highly recommend commenting on posts on Moz. Go to Moz, go to Quora.com, go to LinkedIn. Start commenting and interacting with the community out there. Reply to Marie on Twitter, reply to me on Twitter. And I think that's a great way to start to get involved in the community in general when you're starting out, if you are looking for work. So that's my 2 cents on that, Marie. As we wrap things up, you've got a lot of things going on. You've got videos, podcasts, newsletters. Tell everyone all the places they can find what you're doing, what you're up to online.
Sure thing. So my newsletter's the thing we're the most proud of. mariehaynes.com/newsletter. We have a free and a paid version, but even the free version has everything you want to know in terms of if Google's made an update, if they made an announcement, things like that. And then that's probably the best place. I mean, our new podcast is going to be, I think it's on iTunes now. So you can search my name on iTunes and on Google Play Music. And it's a weekly recap of what Google has done that week. You can find that in iTunes and on Google Play Music. And we're starting to do weekly videos on YouTube as well. So if you search for Marie Haynes on YouTube, we're doing YouTube live recaps of the weekend search, usually on Tuesdays or Wednesdays.
Yeah, that's great. And I do have to say, this is the place to go if you want to just keep up literally with what the name of all your content is. Keep up with the news in SEO. It's the best place to get all that, whether it's the email or the videos or the podcast. You're doing it right. It's in all content forms. So no matter your preference.
Well, that's the hope. Yeah. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. So we're learning every day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marie, for joining us on episode 96 of Experts on the Wire. We'll talk to you next time.